Hey y'all, welcome back to In the Wild. I hope you had a great Labor Day weekend. I know I enjoyed myself. Um, we got a great episode in store for you today because did y'all know that over the past couple of years, the US birth rate has steadily been declining, which I thought that was interesting, but also, I guess, because I'm an adult who is childless. So, not too surprising because, it's hard out here to thinking about raising children. But I thought it was a really interesting topic, and I kept seeing this across different social media platforms that people, or at least Americans, are having less children, and some folks are opting out of parenthood altogether. So today, we brought in a very special guest. He is the dean of the whole College of Business, and he's going to talk about a little bit of his experiences, but also the impact that this may have on the economy and just how having less Americans out there affects a little bit of everything else. So we're talking to Dean Mark Thompson, and I can't wait to chat with him a little bit. So get ready, because here we go. Thank you, Dr. Thompson, for being here with us today. Welcome to In the Wild. Uh, Diving right in, could you talk a little bit of how you got into the field of just economics and business and I guess a higher education?
Sure. Well, first off, thank you for having me here. I got into economics by really starting off as an undergrad as a mathematics major. And you can imagine that in the field of mathematics, unless you're going on the graduate work, that there's probably not known jobs right out of the gate. And so one of the things that the math department did is they required minors. And one of the minors that was listed, certainly was computer science to engineering to a lot of the other sciences. And then there was economics. And so I wasn't interested in the traditional science routes. And so I chose economics. I loved it. Ended up for a while double majoring. Met my wife, and in order to time graduation, I only stuck through the econ, and then went on to graduate school. Had an interest in being in higher education, and got my PhD, and really was driven by trying to solve societal problems and using tools that economists have at their disposal to help address and answer some interesting questions.
So, speaking of societal problems, one of the, I guess, the topic for today was talking about how just Americans are opting to have fewer children and just some are opting out of parenthood altogether. And so I was curious, just from your expertise, of like, what do you think are some of the key factors that you think are contributing to that decision to have fewer children?
Okay. Yeah, that's a very complicated and complex question. I can tell you based on some research and some of my own opinions. I think if you asked a lot of people, you hear a financial kind of reason. Whether it's the cost of raising kids and a number of things related to that. And I do genuinely think there's an element of that. I think there's also what I might call more of an economic cost. The time that it takes and the time that parents have to devote to it. And if you look back traditionally, and you say in the traditional sense of a man and woman getting married and deciding to have a family, there was societal type rules that were in place that the man was the head of the household, and the financial burden was really on him to support the family, and the woman was there to raise the family, and that's where kind of the roles and responsibilities took place, and that's kind of what was agreed upon and accepted by society. And we've seen that trend has really changed. Women are interested, and it's accepted to pursue careers, and it's acceptable for men to take more of a household role in raising kids. And so there's that fundamental kind of, I think, change, and I think in a very good and healthy change. It's not a situation though where it's completely reversed. It's actually more of, I think, that genuine partnership where men in those roles, while they may be much more supportive of their spouse, taking on a career, they also want to play a much more active role in raising the family, and so it creates that work-life balance. But what I think that's also done is it's raised the question that it's not one person or expected to have children. It's a mutual decision of, do we want to? So I think you're seeing fewer, or as you said, the decision of not having kids, not having a family. I think that's probably one element. I think there's also just an element of, when you think of the costs that are associated with it, I think there's a conscious decision to say, no, I want to invest in our relationship. I think there's also elements of, technology, medical innovations have led to, delaying, that I don't have to start a family at 22 and 25. I can wait till my 30s. I can wait till my 40s. So I think seeing some of that has also led to smaller families. I think there's also just the public health aspect of making people much more aware of a number of things that we see, things like unplanned pregnancies are much less than they used to be. So I think just there's a lot of those factors, and I think society's been much more accepting of maybe not accepting the traditional roles that certainly my parents kind of played into.
So what do you think will be, I guess, some of the effects, or how that might affect like the job market and just labor altogether, with there being less Americans to do jobs and to do work?
Yeah, so it's really, it is a national trend. We're seeing it really even globally, especially among developed countries. The fertility rates are falling. We're seeing much slower population growth. The simplest way, and that's where you can always get into danger and trouble, but the simplest is, that's your pool of a workforce. And as it's getting smaller and smaller, it's reducing the capacity for our economy to produce. And the indirect effects from that, you start thinking about a population that's aging, and certainly past that childbirth, stage, and maybe even past that, job market and job stage. Then you have a situation where, how do we support that aging population? And we do that through a variety of programs. How do we support those programs? Tax revenues. And if we are seeing that the population growth is slowing, we may not be able to continue to support the aging population. And so there's a real economic concern or consequence as a result of the lower fertility rates.
And do you think, just, this is me kind of thinking out loud here, of like, because there are less people working, but there'll also be less people spending money on things. So I guess from like a consumer aspect, what do you think there of like, there being less Americans, so there's like, or is there a relation there?
Sure. Population is a major demand factor. So if population is increasing, then there's going to be, for most things, an increase in demand for those goods and services. So then there's a desire to have a workforce to provide those goods and services. When you cut or start to see a reduction in population growth, you're going to start to see less and less demand for those goods and services. And so, that's going to cause a number of issues. And so there certainly is a correlation with population and demand.
And how do you think, I guess, just even though this is a large issue, and you said even globally, like a global trend, but like what would be some like reasonable ways to kind of help the
Help the situation?
Yeah, like help the situation. Besides, obviously, of trying to make people have more kids or trying to encourage them to have more kids, but would it be something like, oh, we're going to just continue to advance technology to replace what would have been jobs, or
Yeah,
what
so
do you
there's a
think?
variety of policy options, and this is where you start getting into very, you know, lively, but yet I think can be healthy political discussions. So when you talk about things like childcare, you know, and being able to provide those kinds of services and at a cost-effective, you know, at a cost-effective way, then you at least take away the disincentive to have kids or to have more kids. And so I think there are various policies on, you know, family leave, childcare, things of that nature that can be looked at. I think there are policies for, you know, that provide disincentives to work longer. And so while that doesn't necessarily impact, you know, population per se, just the ability to fund various programs, you know, if people are in a situation where they feel forced to retire at 64, 68, 70, when they might be in a position that they can continue, you know, we'd want to remove those. You know, so those are some. You know, I think from a cultural standpoint, we've also created this work-life balance, and I think you know, really it's more of figuring out work-life integration, and you know, we hear great companies that do certain things to really encourage that kind of integration. If we can continue those kinds of things, those kinds of trends, there's a variety of and a mix of those that can help alleviate part of the problem.
Another thing that I thought of as someone who is not a homeowner yet, but I was thinking also with, you know, there being less Americans, maybe that will have an effect on the housing market. What are your thoughts on that for folks like me who haven't been able to buy a house yet? Do you think in future years that with less Americans that the housing market would improve or become?
So, yeah, and again, we get into the simplest case where, you know, if there's a lower population, then there's less demand for housing. That's going to drive prices down. When you have areas that are seeing population growth and, you know, there's only so much land, that as that population continues to grow, it's putting that pressure for prices to go up because land is now a scarce resource. So, yes, I mean, to answer your question, but you know, you're going to feel the impact somewhere else. So maybe not in housing.
Maybe not in housing. Where else do you think we would feel the impact of it?
Well, again, just the various services that you might want today or in the future. You have less laborers that are providing to that tax base that are, you know, supporting those kinds of programs.
What other challenges do you think that might arise from there being less Americans out there in the workforce?
Well, I think when you have, you know, so I think one potential problem that you could have is now companies, and certainly in the short-term phase, are competing for fewer and fewer laborers. From a labor standpoint, that may be beneficial in terms of higher wages, because now for me to attract that labor, I need to offer more competitive or at least above market wage. But that can only go so far. I mean, pretty soon the company's got to recover that cost and that higher labor costs, and passing it on to the consumer. You know, that may longer term have implications on fewer and fewer companies, maybe less competition for providing certain goods and services, and that's less competition could lead to overall higher prices for the consumer.
I gotcha. So switching gears a little bit, how do you go about teaching your students this type of stuff to prepare them to care as much about economics and business trends as much as we would want our students or graduates from Hull to do?
Sure. So I try to not be so intimidating in the classroom and really try to bring real world examples. You know, if I get up and talk to the whiteboard and talk with a classic supply and demand model, they're going to look at me, and there's going to be a small portion that just they have the ability to see the applications, but a majority aren't unless you bring that application to them. And so at least some of the things that I try to do, and I know a lot of our faculty and the whole college do, is bring college-related examples. I asked my class one time, how many of you think there's a parking shortage on campus? And they all raised, their hand and feel that there's an issue there. Well, how can we use this model to identify that problem? And then if we can identify the problem with the model, then can it tell us what are some potential solutions? And maybe we can then go have a conversation with, at the time, President Keel or President Keene now, and say, hey, this is basic supply and demand to maybe rectify this problem. What are your thoughts? And when they start to see things like that, then you start talking about, well, what are the implications of tuition? What are the implications on other choices that they make? And so when they start to think about that, they start to realize those trade-offs. And while they may not like the decisions that a politician makes or a leader or a professor, they might now start to appreciate what went behind that decision. And it's ultimately, those applied critical thinking skills.
I'm glad that you're helping to train them on critical thinking, because that's not always common these days.
Right.
I'm also curious about what potential solutions they have for parking. That'll be fun. Maybe one day I can sit in one of your classes just to kind of watch them
Absolutely
talk out loud and think. And as dean, what would you say makes just the whole college experience unique, and just continue to prepare students for the real world, kind of outside of just your teaching, but just as the college as a whole?
Yeah, that's a great question, because that's one of the things that I think is neat about the whole college, and is different to other business schools. So, there's a lot of great business schools out there with great faculty, great credentials, and I would put ours up against them as well, that, they are experts in their respective areas. I think one of the main differences is that we do a lot of professional development activities, co-curricular, experiential education kinds of activities. And so, some of it is very defined programming, like the Women's Leadership Academy that, hopefully you talk to Stacy about. I think that's been a tremendously successful program. But it's also incorporating some of those experiential activities in the courses in the program. A lot of other schools, they offer it as really extracurricular activity. And so it's up to the student to say, I've got my classes, now I'm going to go do this activity, in the evening where they're hosting an event, or something of that nature. We do those too, but we also put them in the classroom. And so, and it's throughout the various programs. So they get that experiential, that professional development kind of activity. And we're hearing that that's from employers, we know at the end of the day, they know the content. It's, can they think critically? Can they apply? Can they work in teams? Can they work on projects? Can they be the team lead? Can they be, a team member? And so those are the kinds of things that we do in and outside the classroom.
Can you highlight any student success that has come from that? Because that does sound really interesting to have those co-curricular opportunities to, like you said, build them to be professionals, like right outside of graduating, they can jump into whatever job that they're called to do. But I'm curious if you have any success stories to share.
Yeah, we've had a variety of students, and I'll point out the Women's Leadership Academy again, that have gone through that program, and that program has led to giving them the confidence to attend that extracurricular activity. And then even, say, one activity a lady went to, it was a networking activity, networking event. At the table happened to be somebody from the system office. They started talking, and the next thing, our student was saying, I need an internship as a graduation requirement. And the lady's like, well, I need an intern, so let's talk. Having the ability to attend that event, having the confidence to have that conversation, and then the confidence and success to ultimately get that internship. And so there's several stories like that we've seen just, get out there and be confident in who you are, and know when to follow up, know how to follow up. So those are the things that we try to incorporate. So.
Yeah, I feel like Hull is known for having students get some really cool internships.
Right.
Are there any internships that a student has had that really stands out or sticks out to you besides the one you just mentioned?
So we had an intern for the Atlanta Braves.
Oh, wow.
Intern for golf architect in Sweden.
Oh.
We've had an intern at Google. So we've had some pretty prominent ones, along with just great partners in the local area. ADP, Textron, John Deere, a lot of the local accounting firms. But those are probably some of the key ones that I'll call out.
What does it feel like for you as dean when you see a student that gets an internship, whether it's international like Sweden or it's just something local, and they're able to like find their success in their niche and whatever it is that they're doing? What does that feel like for you?
Oh, it's very satisfying, and I'll actually say it's satisfying on both ways. We require the internship, and they have to go through a process for us to review that internship experience. We don't want them just getting laundry and serving coffee. We want there to be a project. So even when students have come back and they've presented to the class, here was my internship experience. Here's what I did. And that's not what I want to do. That's just as satisfying, because at least they know then that that's not what they want to do. And it allows us to have that conversation of, well, what did you not like about that setting? Because you may very well have liked the activity that you did, but you just didn't like, maybe being back in a cubicle crunching numbers. You wanted to have more of a public interface. Well, there are those roles, and how even in the same field, same concentration, same degree program. So having those conversations, and so it's incredibly satisfying seeing that student that says, yes, this is what I want to do, and I like this place and I want to continue. It's also satisfying seeing that student saying, I don't want to do that, and so I'm gonna work now on doing this. And we've had successes on both.
Yeah, I remember during my undergrad, someone saying that college is not just a place for you to find out what you like to do, but also to try things so you know what you don't like.
Right.
So I think that's a perfect example of, just being involved and trying to, soak everything in, take everything in, and you'll find some stuff that you don't care for, but it helps direct you to what you're more aligned with.
So a classic example of, just we require the internship class to have everybody present. And one of the points that I highlight is at the end, you all see that you all have different backgrounds, different experiences. You all worked at different companies. Even some of you that worked at the same company, you had different projects. You all talked to the same skills that you needed to be successful. You all talked to the same challenges that you had in working with people and how to solve those challenges. Those are skills you can take regardless of what employer you work for, what field you go into. And again, that's where I say that's the real satisfying piece, is they start to see all of that together.
Well, I'm enjoying this conversation so far. For those watching, stay tuned because we'll be right back.
This is the curated palette at Westabu Gallery. Cheers! With contemporary art, there are no rules or limits. It's fun, it's experimental, it can be personal.
All right, and we're back with Dr. Thompson. So before, we've been talking about how Americans having less children may affect pretty much everything.
Right.
But we also, where we left off, was just talking about your role as dean. So I was curious, what would you say out of all the hats that you wear as dean, what would you say would be the most fulfilling part?
I really would say student success. And that can take on many different forms. It could be from a student that didn't think they could go to college, go and be successful. A student that is struggling with economics and they can get through the class. To a student that is trying to find that internship and they find it and they realize this is what they want to do. To graduating, to then being alums and just seeing, there's nothing that's more fulfilling than, an alum coming back and saying, gosh, I remember you doing this. And it may seem like at the time that one of the smallest things that you did, but was very impactful. And so that to me is very fulfilling.
And this fall, Hull has some new things going on. Do you mind sharing some of the cool things that you have for our students coming this fall?
Sure. So one of the things that we really put a lot of time and effort is to have a number of new market-driven concentrations. That is something that I think is very impactful for students. Starting to see, that there are a lot of different options here. We also, and really I'll take it back to this summer, we kind of piggyback on the Women's Leadership Academy, which is a college ladies program, to having what we call the Lead Hership program, which was for rising juniors and rising seniors. Very similar concept, but it was a week-long program over the summer and incredibly successful, great feedback. I mean, seeing the students, loving the program, loving being at AU, loving to interact with our faculty, to then seeing parents tell us just the changes that they saw over the course of the week. So really, really excited about continuing that program in future summers. We have, obviously a full plate of, events and activities and, celebrations and all geared up and getting ready for the fall. So,
with all of the new concentration that you have coming out, are there any in particular that you're really excited to have available for students?
See, now that's a question that's going to get me in trouble. I think, I'm an economist, so the econ and finance-oriented concentrations I'm fascinated by, but I also, we have a lot of students that talk about, human resources management and a desire to be in that field. And so when we're able to offer that concentration, we have a lot of employers that are looking for logistics and operations. And so being able to offer a supply chain management type concentration, so really getting at the market, we've got programs for what the workforce needs and what student desires are.
So all of them.
All of them.
I love how diplomatic that answer was. But yeah, I remember because I was talking to some Hull alum and I was sharing some of them and they were like, oh, how did they,
right?
Why didn't this come when I was, getting ready to graduate or after I graduated? But I think it's going to be really cool for students to have more options to like really follow their passion in that way.
Right.
So I kind of gave you the forewarning a while ago, but I didn't give all of the other deans this. But I feel like it's only fair for you to play a fun round of Guess the Deans.
All right.
So with this game, just like all the other deans that I've forced to do this, I'm going to read out their alma mater, a fun fact about them or two, and I want you to give your best guess as to who you think matches up with which.
All right.
So first one is an alum from Georgia Tech. They have been dean since 2017, and they have served in the military.
I'd say, is that the former dean, Rick Franza?
No.
No. Wow.
These are all current deans.
And you can't specify the alum as an undergrad or their graduate? Just one of the schools, that's their alum. I'm going to go with John Sutherland.
Correct.
All right.
See, I told you it would be easier than you,
All right.
than you thought it was. Next up is an alum from the State University of New York at Gnesko. They've been dean since 2021 and volunteers for the Heart Walk.
Jennifer Sullivan.
Ding, ding, ding. You're better at this than you thought you were. Next up is a graduate from the University of Virginia. They've been dean since 2018, and they have also served in the military.
Dean since 2021?
2018.
2018. Oh, man. I'm drawing a real blank. That's a good one.
They also have a love for the theater and the arts.
Mark Austin?
No.
No.
Dr. Pretlow.
Oh, okay. Of course.
Next up is a graduate from East Tennessee State University. They've been dean since 2023, and they are an alum of their college. One of the newer deans.
Right. Is it 2023?
Mm-hmm.
And they're an alum
Mm-hmm.
of their college.
I'll give you a hint, and they're on the health sciences
Does it
campus.
say Beth Neesmith?
No.
No. Oh, Nancy Young.
Yes, but Dr. Neesmith, that was, I wouldn't say like a almost completely correct based off of what I gave you. Next up is a graduate of Johns Hopkins University, dean since April 2017, and they've been faculty since 2001, and is a diehard Phillies fan.
All right, give me the clues again.
Graduated from Johns Hopkins University, dean since April of 2017, faculty since 2001, and is a diehard Phillies fan.
Some of this doesn't match up. I'm going to say David Hess.
That's correct.
All right.
I want to say this one is probably an easy one. Is a graduate from Ohio State University, dean since 2021, and is a Lego master.
Kim Davies.
Correct. Next up is a graduate of the University of Georgia, dean since 2019, faculty since 2003, and has twin sons.
Judy Wilson.
Correct. Next up is a graduate from Brown University, dean since 2018, and their fun fact was that they drove a cab in Manhattan to earn money for their tuition. We're down to the final few deans. So
I
now you
know.
can like use the process of elimination. Brown University, dean since 2018, and drove a cab in Manhattan to earn money for their college tuition. Dean Schwartzman.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay, and last one is a graduate from the University of Pennsylvania, dean since 2022, and I do not have a fun fact for them. But you can also use the process of elimination. You said their name before.
Mark Austin.
That's correct. So you did a lot better than you thought.
Yeah. Oh, it's fun.
I guess so. Just kind of wrapping up here with.
Well, what's my fun facts?
I should have made you guess yourself. Where's it at? Texas Tech University, dean since 2023. Do you want to guess your own fun fact?
No.
No. I have on here that you make your own wine.
Correct. Yes. All right. Good.
How did you get into that, making your own wine?
I came here in 2013 as the associate dean, and my wife said after a year I need to make sure I have a hobby. So I looked into winemaking, and I started my first wine in 2014,
Oh, wow.
and been doing it ever since.
I like drinking wine. But we'll have that conversation after.
Red or white?
Either.
Okay. All right.
I usually prefer white wine, but I'll drink either.
Okay.
So I guess just, like I said, closing up here, what would you say just for the future of the workforce, especially with there being less Americans out there, what does that, do you think, look like, or what advice do you have for those who are about to get ready to join the workforce?
So I in the simplest way, it's going to be a more competitive workforce. There's going to be a premium on, one, knowing and being an expert in your field, those professional skills, and continuing to learn. The workforce is very dynamic and changing. Jobs, 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago are very different and are done very differently. Processes are constantly being updated and being more efficient, and so it's staying current and relevant. And so it's going to be competitive and continue to get more and more competitive. So.
And do you have any words of encouragement for those who may want to study business with whole or major or minor?
Yes, do it. It is a skill set that will complement really any field. And when you start talking about things from cyber to the sciences to the health field, understanding the business behind it is only going to give you more and more of a leg up or an advantage. That's why we have programs like the MD MBA and the DMD MBA. Is they need to know how to run their healthcare organization as a business. Just the way things are set up, or otherwise they're not going to be able to practice medicine or practice dentistry. It will help tremendously. So.
Well, thanks again, Dr. Thompson, for being here. I hope everyone watching feels a little bit more informed about all the cool things happening at Hull, and I guess a little bit about the economy too. So, thanks
for having me.
All right, y'all. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Dean Thompson. I certainly did, talking to him and just kind of being I want to call myself like a baby economist, even though we're talking about there being less babies out there in the world. And a fun, or maybe not so fun fact that I wanted to share with you guys is that Economists are predicting that by the year 2030, nearly 1 in 5 Americans will be over the age of 65, leading a major shift to the demographic landscape. So kind of going back to our conversation with Dean Thompson about, hey, with more folks being older and living longer and there being less Americans here, that is going to cause a major shift. So I think that's really cool and interesting. Also, because I'll likely be working past the age of 65, a little sad. But I hope you enjoyed this episode. Don't be too depressed on some of that statistics. And if you really like that episode, feel free to like, subscribe, tell us what you think about it. Tell us if you are curious about how the economy is going to affect you when you're a little bit older. And if you're a student and you haven't started the workforce yet, let us know your thoughts. So share that with us online on our Instagram. And until then, I will see you guys in the next one. Go Jags!